In the late 80s, an engineer named Sung-Kook Kim received a calling from God that would change his life forever. Kim had a vision. He had a vision that would force him to leave his career, leave his church, and pursue the one thing that meant the most to him, serving the Lord. Kim felt God telling him to minister to the children of the first wave of Korean immigrants. Because they were a growing group of people that were growing in number, yet their spiritual needs were not being addressed, Kim took it upon himself 3 years later to minister to a handful of young college students. Today, 9 years later, that number has grown tremendously. They no longer borrow space in someone else's building, but now possess their own 11,000 square foot church. In keeping with his original commitment, Sung-Kook Kim stepped down from the position of head pastor so that a true second-generation Korean-American pastor could lead the ever-growing congregation into the new millennium.
I've been the pastor at KAC for a little over a year. I came up here in September of 1999, and so just a little bit over a year I've been the new pastor at Korean American Calvary Baptist Church. Well, I believe it's God who really led me here to KAC, but He did that through a couple of different people. I was visiting up here as a family vacation, just visiting some pastor friends, and it was in March, April of 1999, and through a personal friend who knew Pastor Kim, who was currently the pastor of this church, we were introduced, and then we had learned about one another, and so that's how I got introduced to KAC.
I think that was one of the reasons why we became a church, from a Bible study to student mission, then on to become a church, was because I recalled some of these people who were saved through our ministry asking a question. Are we a church? And I think it meant great deal to them. So. To me, everyone who got to know Christ through our church, brought such a memorable experience to me.
Went to a Southern Baptist high school, and I can say that this Southern Baptist church is a lot different than my Southern Baptist high school because, there's just one piano, and there's like no tambourines, no nothing. It's just basically that, and the style is a lot more casual here. Whereas when I was in high school, it was very much, you need to dress up, you need to, play that part. And so I really was attracted to the more comfortable atmosphere and the more casual Southern Baptist style, because it was really not what I expected at all. Currently, I've really been finding the cell ministry is really helpful in terms of getting to know people that I normally don't talk to during the week, and kind of coming from totally different walks of life. So that's really neat to just share our hearts, and being vulnerable with them is hard sometimes because we're just kind of complete strangers, but as we get to know each other, I think that's a good way to hold each other accountable.
Cell ministry, I think maybe can be viewed as it's a small group ministry of Korean American Calvary Baptist Church, and what we try to do is create care groups, small groups, usually from anywhere from 8 people to about 12 or so people in different regions, and they meet informally in homes and in different geographical areas. And what we try to do is create a small group environment where people can really minister to one another and care for one another and create fellowship opportunities, and then also to create an entry point for new people that come to our church, and it helps them to get to know other members on a personal level. And then eventually what we would like to see the cell group do is to begin to be used as ministry groups where we serve both the ministries of the church as well as outreaches that we do. I'd like to involve the cell ministry in all aspects of the ministry at KAC.
We are what you might call a commuter church, in that many of us do not live nearby our church. Many of us drive a long distance to our church on Sunday. So it may not work out too well for people to get together more than once or twice at church. So what cell group, having a specific location, allows people who live in that area to get together to review last Sunday's sermon, perhaps, or to talk about the Daily Bread, which is a quiet time study guide that we are going through, and also just to talk about struggles and blessings that God has given us.
You know, the fellowship, especially in the area of sharing of a meal together, I think, you know, it has a lot of symbolic meaning in our Christian life.
I love the food.
I find it very interesting that, you know, that even in the Bible, you know, sharing of a meal is so important. Just as, you know, Christ shared, you know, the last Supper, you know, with his disciples.
I think about when I'm going to eat and what I'm going to eat.
Sharing a meal is very important, and I think that's been a, you know, a very important part of our ministry. And I think you know, that goes on to, you know, sharing, you know, a lot of things in our life. I think we are very open to share, you know, what's bothering us, you know, what's been challenges.
Well, if you're familiar with KAC, you know that people at KAC really enjoy eating, and so food happens to always be a part of everything that we do. It seems to be a sort of a supportive ministry to everything that goes on. Every Sunday after the worship service, we have a lunch meal that is being prepared by usually one of the members. We rotate different families that are preparing the meals, and they all get involved in preparation, serving, and cleanup, and it's part of Korean American Calvary Baptist Church's ministry, and we value the food ministry because it just happens to create a setting where fellowship can happen more naturally.
Fellowship is a lot of fun. We have a lot of things in common. Everybody that I know at the church pretty much loves food, so fellowship is centered around food. And also, I can blame my husband for this, but he brought pung to this church. So I know that that's been kind of something that a lot of people do in our fellowship at church. The baptism, we both, I think, were a little apprehensive about it because we're both from a very traditional Presbyterian background, and I had never given my testimony in front of the whole congregation, so it was a lot more emotional than I thought it was going to be. And I think that for both of us, it was a good experience, and we were able to rededicate, you know, our lives to Christ. And so I think it was a good experience, even though we were both apprehensive in the beginning.
Definitely the most memorable experience was the baptism. I come from a very strong Presbyterian tradition, and I'm not sure if hesitant was the word, but I was a little bit apprehensive about baptism itself, just because it's a little bit different in the Presbyterian tradition in terms of when you get baptized and the ideals of baptism. But as it turned out, it was literally my pride, and it is how we become a member of this church in terms of through baptism. And it was a very, very powerful experience for me in terms of me having a chance to at least share my testimony and being actually baptized with water. And it kind of refreshed me, and also kind of rededicated in terms of my commitment to God.
I
approached saying in the worship team if I could sing with him, and right away he was like, sure, cool. And I mean, this was even before I was a member. So like, I've been part of the worship team or praise team, and then choir.
I'm currently on the praise team. I play guitar mainly, and I prefer to sing.
Knowing that, God has given me something, like one talent, I have to use it for His glory. I have to do it for Him, and I mean that's the least I can do, and that's all I know what to do right now until I can find something else. But I mean, leading the congregation. I mean, I love, hearing them sing and knowing that I'm being used for it. It's pretty cool.
I think it's neat to be able to use my passion for music and my passion for praising God through song, and hopefully that's going out, filtering into the congregation so that they are also wanting to get close to God through song.
I'm a head of children's ministry, and I'm also a teacher for the first graders through the 2-year-olds. And I feel great coming here every Sunday and watching the kids grow and helping them learn about Christ, and just fellowshipping with the other teachers and helping them come every Sunday, and just having that happiness to help the kids. My biggest reward would be watching the kids treat each other nicely every Sunday, and just seeing the joy on their faces.
Currently, I'm a Sunday school teacher. I teach age 4 and 5. God teaches me more than I teach the kids. It's weekly. I go through the Bible study material, and there's teacher's devotional time, and it challenges me to think it over. And before I can teach the kids, I have to be stand straight before God.
In our church specifically though, we have a lot of children who are in our age group. So there is numerous children kids who are of their similar age groups, and that's, I think, that in itself is something that gives a lot of big offering to our children. They can fit right into the group and play and fight, and also do the Bible studies. They can identify with other children who are with similar background, who are not quite Koreans but who are not quite Americans, and I think they can find more comfort and identify with that.
I see that we are a Korean American church, and that's who we can relate most with. But the people that the Korean Americans hang around with and are involved in are broader than Korean American, and so I see the need for us as a church to be sensitive to that and to be willing to cross barriers in terms of culture to reach out to all people.
I have always felt home here at the church because like I say, they're speaking American people, and they make you feel so welcome, and they're real friendly, and they're people loving church, and they love the Lord, and which I do too, and I just feel like I'm part of their family.
What impressed me the most when I came here was the fact that people were really friendly, and I remember setting foot outside of the door right before we were having lunch, which I thought was very strange to have lunch right after church because I had never done that before. But I remember Pastor Kim just shaking my hand, greeting me, made sure that I felt at home, and started introducing me to other people and just kind of eased me in. So I think that was a really memorable experience for me.
the fact that this Korean American church, even the name spells out that it is a Korean American Calvary Baptist Church, and predominantly it is currently made up of Korean Americans, and so I don't know that I can really say that that is that I enjoy that more, but I can say that I can relate to the Korean Americans more, just because I am a Korean American person, and I'm familiar with the experiences of growing up in the U.S. and be able to relate to the issues that people go through.
The fact that we have black hair, the fact that we have, similar cultures, draws us closer initially. But really, I really believe that we become one when we come to Christ.
I do enjoy it that the members here are Korean American, because I feel like, in addition to sharing my Christian walk with them as, sisters and brothers in Christ, I feel like I have something more of a bond with them, in that we were all kind of brought up the same way, and we can share a lot of the same culture. So I feel very comfortable with the people here.
It helps to identify ourselves in, some of those second generation kids who are lost. Hopefully they'll see us through our website and all that.
But there are even more interesting things. There are 5 women appearing in Matthew's genealogy. Do you know who they are?
We wanted our church to be all English speaking. You might have noticed, or anyone who comes to our church and talk to some of the leadership in our church might have noticed, they, for people who speak English, they have some accent. Some of them feel kind of uncomfortable talking in English. Yet, even our first pastor, who was, let's face it, he's Korean, not Korean American, he insisted, and we all agreed that for the benefit of a mission that we want to accomplish, which was to really spread the gospel through the people who need it, that happen to be second generation or more Korean Americans.
It's a informal environment where people who may not have had a church upbringing can feel comfortable enough to come and see what church is like, and also for people who have maybe been hurt being involved in church and have seen a lot of negative things, I think can find some positive things at KAC as they also get to know some of the members.
His messages are so practical.
It's easier for me to come in sweat.
We have really down-to-earth people who really love Christ, and that's all we strive for.
I know God is with me wherever I'm at, but being in the church, it seems like He's right beside me all the time.
I think that's a dream, isn't it?
I think I have the greatest privilege being able to be a pastor of a church, and especially a church like KAC.